Danny DeVito just turned 80, but behind the laughter and Hollywood success lies a heartbreaking truth. His story is not the glamorous Hollywood fairy tale people think it is. Instead, it's filled with rejection, pain, and sacrifice, things he kept hidden for decades. Even now, at 80 years old, the reality of how he lives might shock you. From the very start, Danny's life was stacked against him. He was born on November 17th, 1944, in Neptune, New Jersey, the youngest of five children in a struggling family. His mother, Julia, was already 40 years old when she had him, and she admitted years later something that would haunt Danny forever. "I didn't want him." She said those words not in cruelty, but in honesty. She had already raised children and didn't expect or want another. Yet as much as she later said she was proud of him, those words never left Danny. Imagine being told by your own mother that you were never wanted. For a child, that kind of rejection is a wound that never truly heals. At home, things weren't easier. His father, Daniel Sr., was a candy store owner by day, a friendly face in the community, a man people liked. But at night, fueled by alcohol, he turned into someone else entirely, violent, loud, unpredictable. The kind of father who kept his kids on edge, never knowing when the storm would hit. Danny learned to read the sounds of the house like a warning system, the clinking of bottles, the heavy footsteps, the change in tone. By the time Danny was 15, the police had been called to the DeVito home 17 times. For a boy barely into his teenage years, that was trauma he couldn't escape. But there was something even harder. Danny wasn't like other kids. He had a rare genetic condition called Fairbanks disease, a bone growth disorder that stunted his height. He grew to just 4 feet 10 inches. To outsiders, it looked like just short stature. But for Danny, it meant constant pain. His hips, knees, and back ached every single day. By the time he was in his 20s, he described his daily pain level as a 6 to 8 out of 10. Yet he never let it show. He smiled, he laughed, he pushed forward, hiding the agony behind a mask of humor. Even as a child, Danny realized he couldn't stay in his neighborhood. Drugs and violence were everywhere, and many of his childhood friends didn't survive their teenage years. Some overdosed, some ended up in prison. Out of the dozen close friends Danny had growing up, only 3 made it past 25 without destruction. Danny knew he needed to escape, and he made a plan. He studied hard, worked odd jobs, and scraped together $237 in savings. With the help of a parish priest, he convinced his reluctant parents to let him attend oratory preparatory school. That decision likely saved his life. But even with school as an escape, Danny still faced the weight of his condition. As he got older, Hollywood itself would turn his greatest vulnerability into a weapon. Producers pressured him to undergo surgery, to break and lengthen his legs, to reshape his face, to make himself taller, more normal. At one point, a studio offered him the equivalent of nearly $1 million in today's money to go through with it. Danny refused. In fact, in one legendary story, he burned the contract in a beach bonfire, saying he would rather be a first-rate version of himself than a second-rate version of someone else. Still, the pain was always there. On movie sets, he would collapse during filming. While shooting One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, he collapsed 4 times but pretended it was part of the role. Doctors offered him pain medication, but he refused to risk addiction. Instead, quietly, without attention, he donated over $12 million to research for bone conditions. He never wanted credit. He just didn't want other kids to grow up with the kind of suffering he had. Before Hollywood, Danny had a surprising path. He trained as a beautician, putting in 1,500 hours at beauty school, graduating second in his class. He worked at his sister's salon, ironically named Curl Up and Die, where he became so skilled that clients booked him months in advance. He even invented a hairstyle called the Neptune twist that won awards. It was during one of these salon days that a theater producer encouraged him to audition for a play. That chance encounter shifted the course of his life forever. When Danny applied to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, it was originally just to study makeup. But during the audition, the school asked him to perform a monologue. Nervously, he acted out a scene from The Rainmaker. Something clicked. They offered him a spot, not in makeup, but in acting. Danny hesitated at first, going back to the salon. But 3 days later, the Academy called again with a scholarship offer. That phone call changed his life. Soon, Danny was in New York, sharing a cramped $75 a month apartment with another struggling actor, Michael Douglas. Yes, the son of Kirk Douglas, though Michael kept that secret at the time. The two young men barely survived, eating canned beans, living with cockroaches, and even spending their last $27 printing headshots. They hustled every single day, but while Douglas started booking roles, Danny faced rejection after rejection. Between 1967 and 1970, Danny auditioned 248 times. Out of those, he landed just 3 small jobs, earning less than $800 in total. To make ends meet, he worked every odd job he could find. Parking cars, working as a mannequin in store windows, even cleaning cages at the LA Zoo. For a time, he was homeless, living out of his old VW Beetle, showering at the YMCA, and eating at soup kitchens. And yet, through all of this, Danny refused to quit. His determination, his pain, his defiance, it all carried him toward a moment that would finally change everything. That moment was about to arrive. By the early 1970s, Danny DeVito was close to giving up. He had faced so many rejections, so many closed doors, that even he started to wonder if Hollywood would ever take him seriously. He thought about going back to beauty school, maybe even taking a steady job at the post office. But fate had other plans. In 1972, his father died, and the loss hit Danny harder than he expected. Despite the violence and instability, he loved his father deeply. The grief left him at a crossroads. He had the acceptance letter for a postal job in his hands when the phone rang. It was a casting call for a role in a film adaptation of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. That single call changed the trajectory of his life. It wasn't a random audition either. Danny had already played the role of Martini in a stage version years earlier. He knew the character inside and out. And there was another twist of fate. His old roommate, Michael Douglas, was now one of the producers. It was the break Danny desperately needed. The filming conditions were brutal. The movie was shot inside a real mental hospital, and some of the extras were actual patients. The cast lived together in close quarters, blurring the lines between reality and performance. For Danny, the environment was both triggering and inspiring. It forced him to tap into his own childhood trauma, the nights of hiding in closets while his father raged. That pain bled into his portrayal of Martini, giving the performance a raw authenticity that audiences felt immediately. When One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest hit theaters in 1975, it became a phenomenon. The film won 5 major Oscars, including Best Picture. Danny's role wasn't big, just 5 minutes and 52 seconds of screen time, but it was unforgettable. Suddenly, the man who had been told he was too short, too strange, too different, was finally noticed. And yet, even after that breakthrough, Hollywood wasn't ready to embrace him fully. Casting directors still saw him as a curiosity, someone who could only play the oddball sidekick. For 3 more years, he scraped by, auditioning, hustling, and facing rejection after rejection. Then came a decision that almost everyone told him would be career suicide. In 1978, Danny auditioned for a sitcom called Taxi. At the time, moving from film to television was considered a step backward. His agent begged him not to do it. Producers warned him that television could trap him, that he'd never be seen as a serious actor again. But Danny didn't listen. He trusted his gut. When he auditioned, he didn't just read lines. He performed a full 7-minute monologue, channeling all the rejection and anger he had bottled up for years. The character was Louis De Palma, a loud, mean-spirited, unapologetic cab dispatcher. At just 4 feet 10 inches, Danny didn't fit the mold of a Hollywood lead. But Louis wasn't meant to be polished. He was meant to be raw, nasty, unforgettable. ABC executives were nervous. They thought viewers might not accept such a physically small man in such a dominating role. But James L. Brooks, one of the show's creators, fought for Danny. He even threatened to quit if the network refused to cast him. Danny signed the contract immediately, even though it paid him 40% less than other actors. He didn't care. For the first time, he had a role that let him channel his pain into power. When Taxi premiered, audiences were stunned. Louis De Palma was vile, selfish, and cruel, and people loved it. Within just 8 episodes, Danny received more than 11,000 fan letters. The show broke barriers. His character generated 3 to 5 complaint letters every single week. But those complaints only fueled the hype. Danny had a secret weapon in playing Louis. Before each scene, he would sit alone and list the names of every person who had rejected him in Hollywood. That anger became Louis's voice, Louis's sneer, Louis's venom. And it worked. By 1980, Taxi was a cultural juggernaut. 93% of Americans could recognize Louis De Palma just from his silhouette or voice. Danny's dispatch booth, built to fit his size, became one of the most iconic sets in sitcom history. In 1980, he won a Golden Globe. In 1981, he won an Emmy. His Emmy acceptance speech became legendary for its brevity. Just 12 words. "Thank you. I'm really happy about this. Taxi is the best show on television." It remains the shortest Emmy acceptance speech ever. But behind the scenes, not everyone celebrated him. Some judges didn't even want to nominate him because they thought his character was too awful to reward. His win proved them wrong. It changed television forever, showing that audiences could love a villain just as much, maybe even more, than a hero. NBC even tried to poach him, offering him $175,000 per episode for his own show, over 11 times what he was making. Danny refused. He stayed loyal to Taxi and the cast who had believed in him when no one else did. And in the middle of all this success, something even more unexpected happened. Danny met the woman who would become the love of his life. It wasn't in some glamorous Hollywood setting. It happened in the most ordinary, almost awkward way. His roommate at the time was dating a young actress named Rhea Perlman. She came over one night to break up with the roommate and instead ended up talking with Danny. For 6 hours straight, they sat and talked. Danny later said he knew within 22 minutes that he wanted to marry her. A year later, Rhea joined Taxi to play Louis's love interest. Nobody knew they were dating in real life, but their chemistry was so electric that producers thought it was just brilliant acting. The truth was, they had secretly moved in together after only 2 weeks, cramming themselves into Danny's tiny 450-square-foot apartment. As their love grew, so did Danny's career. But Hollywood is fickle, and with every success came new pressures. Casting directors kept pushing him to get surgery, to change his look, to conform. He refused. Instead, he built a reputation for saying no. No to vanity, no to compromise, no to becoming anyone but himself. But success in Hollywood always comes with a price, and for Danny, that price was about to rise. When Taxi ended in 1983, many thought Danny DeVito would fade away. For television actors, especially those known for quirky side roles, making the leap to film was almost impossible. Hollywood had its standards, and Danny didn't fit them. He wasn't tall, handsome, or conventionally leading man material, but Danny wasn't about to give up. That same year, he landed a role in Terms of Endearment, a film that would go on to win Best Picture at the Oscars. His part wasn't large, but his presence stood out. Audiences remembered him, and in Hollywood, sometimes that's all you need. A single impression that lingers. Then came Romancing the Stone in 1984. The adventure film starring Michael Douglas and Kathleen Turner was supposed to be a star vehicle for them. But Danny, playing the scheming Ralph, stole scene after scene. The movie made $115 million on a $10 million budget. And suddenly, Danny was no longer just a sitcom actor. He was a film star. The momentum didn't stop there. He reunited with Douglas and Turner in The Jewel of the Nile in 1985, cementing himself as part of a Hollywood trio audiences loved. But Danny wasn't just acting, he was learning. Watching directors, studying scripts, quietly planning his next move. In 1986, he took a risk. He starred in Ruthless People, playing a greedy husband who refuses to pay ransom after his wife is kidnapped. The character was vile, selfish, and yet hilarious. The movie cost $7.5 million and earned over $71 million. Danny earned a Golden Globe nomination, proof that audiences loved him as both villain and comedian. But Danny wanted more. He didn't just want to act, he wanted to direct. And in 1987, he made his directorial debut with Throw Mama from the Train. Studios hesitated, but Danny insisted. He would only star in it if he could also direct. He won. The movie was strange, dark, and funny, exactly his style. Critics praised him, and he earned another Golden Globe nomination. Then came the film that would redefine his career, Twins, 1988. The idea seemed ridiculous, Danny DeVito and Arnold Schwarzenegger as long-lost twins. But instead of taking upfront salaries, Danny Arnold and director Ivan Reitman made a deal to split 40% of the profits. It was a massive gamble. The film made $216 million worldwide, the equivalent of more than $500 million today. Each man earned between $35 to $40 million. Danny had proven he wasn't just a supporting actor. He was a leading man. He proved something else, too. You didn't need to be tall, handsome, or polished to carry a movie. You just had to be good. While audiences laughed, Danny's body was breaking down. The pain from Fairbanks disease never stopped. On set, he worked through it. Off set, he collapsed. He started his mornings with therapy, ice baths, and stretching routines just to make it through the day. But he never let the world see the pain. Instead, he gave everything to his performances. In 1989, Danny directed The War of the Roses, reuniting Douglas and Turner in a vicious story of divorce. It was brutal, funny, and unforgettable. In Germany, the film's title even became slang for ugly divorces. Danny's directing style stood out, darkly comic, emotionally raw, visually striking. Then came his most haunting transformation. In 1992, Tim Burton cast him as the Penguin in Batman Returns. For hours each day, Danny sat in makeup chairs as artists turned him into Oswald Cobblepot, the grotesque, twisted villain. But it wasn't just costume. Danny lived the character, crawling, snarling, and losing himself in the role. The performance was terrifying and tragic, earning him worldwide acclaim. He was even nominated for Best Villain at the MTV Movie Awards. To this day, fans still call him the definitive Penguin. But Danny didn't just stick to acting. That same year, he directed Hoffa, a serious biopic about labor leader Jimmy Hoffa, starring Jack Nicholson. It was a bold move, gritty, political, and full of anger. Danny wasn't afraid to tackle tough subjects. He worked with famous writer David Mamet, giving the film a sharp, fiery edge. Though it didn't dominate at the box office, critics respected his vision. At the same time, Danny was building something powerful behind the scenes. In 1992, he founded Jersey Films, his own production company. With partners Michael Shamberg and Stacey Sher, Danny turned Jersey Films into one of the most influential indie studios of the 1990s. In 1994, Jersey Films took a huge gamble on a strange script that no major studio wanted. That script was Pulp Fiction. Danny gave Quentin Tarantino office space, money, and freedom to make the film his way. With a budget of just $8 million, Tarantino promised it would look like a $25 million movie, and he delivered. The film became a cultural earthquake, winning the Palme d'Or at Cannes and earning 7 Oscar nominations. Without Danny DeVito, Pulp Fiction might never have been made. In 1996, Danny directed Matilda, based on Roald Dahl's beloved book. He played Matilda's awful father, cast Rhea Perlman as her mother, and brought dark comedy to children's cinema. But behind the scenes, something even more touching happened. The young star, Mara Wilson, was dealing with her mother's terminal cancer. Danny and Rhea took her in, caring for her like family. Danny even brought a near-finished cut of the film to the hospital, so Mara's mother could see it before she died. Mara would later say that Danny and Rhea felt like her favorite aunt and uncle. By the late 1990s, Danny was everywhere. Acting, directing, producing. Jersey Films produced Get Shorty, Aaron Brockovich, Man on the Moon, and more. He was shaping cinema from every angle. He had money, power, respect. But behind the cameras, his private battles grew darker. The pain from Fairbanks disease worsened. Surgeries gave temporary relief, but the agony always returned. Doctors told him to keep quiet. Hollywood didn't want to see weakness. So Danny pushed through, collapsing on sets, working through tears, and hiding his condition from the world. By the early 2000s, the strain on his marriage began to show. He and Rhea Perlman, once inseparable, started to drift apart. The very love story that Hollywood adored was now under quiet pressure. And while Danny kept smiling on screen, behind the scenes his life was beginning to unravel. By the 2000s, Danny DeVito was a household name. He had gone from struggling actor to Hollywood heavyweight, not just as a performer, but as a director and producer shaping the industry itself. Yet behind the success, his personal life was starting to fracture. For years, Danny and Rhea Perlman had been considered one of Hollywood's strongest couples. They met in the late 1970s, fell in love quickly, and married in 1982. Together they raised three children, Lucy, Grace, and Jake. To outsiders, their marriage looked unshakable. They worked together on projects, co-founded Jersey Films, and built a creative partnership that lasted decades. But no marriage is immune to the pressures of fame. Danny's schedule was relentless. Acting, directing, producing, his days stretched into nights, his nights into mornings. He was often away from home, either on set or buried in production meetings. Rhea, who had her own successful career on Cheers and in film, struggled with the imbalance. Over time, cracks formed. By 2012, after 30 years of marriage, Danny and Rhea separated. The news shocked fans. People who grew up with Taxi and Matilda saw them as the Hollywood couple that had lasted. But Danny's grueling work schedule and rumors of closeness with younger women on set fueled speculation.